afternoon, months later, there was a small ceremony in the village, a thanksgiving for the harvest. Wayan invited me. I stood among people I barely knew, in clothes I had borrowed, watching offerings of flowers and rice being placed with such care and gratitude. I realized I hadn't felt gratitude like that in years. Not for a harvest, not for anything. I had been so focused on what I lost that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply be thankful for a day, for a meal, for people willing to include a stranger in their traditions. That was the moment everything changed for me. Not a single dramatic event, but a quiet realization. I hadn't come to Bali to find paradise. I had come to remember what it felt like to matter to someone, even in a small way. And somehow, in a warung with a woman who couldn't speak my language, I had found exactly that. It has been almost 3 years now. My Indonesian is still far from perfect, but it's enough. I know my neighbors by name. I know which stall sells the best coffee, and I know Wayan's grandchildren call me Om, now Uncle, as if I have always belonged here. My house is small, nothing like the one I sold in Manchester, but it doesn't feel empty. It feels lived in. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights I doubted everything, nights I questioned whether I had thrown away my old life for nothing. But looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see back then. Home was never about the size of the house or the country on my passport. Home was about being seen, being welcomed, being fed by someone who didn't need to understand my language, to understand my loneliness. I came to Indonesia broken and unsure at an age when most people believe it's too late to start over. But it wasn't too late. It was exactly the right time. And if there's one thing I would tell anyone standing where I once stood, staring at an empty house, wondering if they have the courage to leave, it's this. Sometimes you have to lose everything familiar to find what you were actually searching for all along. I still remember the exact moment I signed the papers to sell my house. 31 years in that home, 31 years of birthdays, holidays, and a marriage that ended in silence long before it ended on paper. I sat in my car afterward and cried, not because I was sad to lose the house, but because I finally understood how empty it had become. I was 67 years old. My pension was barely covering my bills in Manchester. My children had their own lives, their own children, their own reasons not to call as often as I hoped. And every night I sat alone in a house built for a family that no longer existed. I had seen videos online, people my age starting over in Bali, sunsets, warm smiles, a slower pace of life. I told myself it was a fantasy, something for younger people with more courage than me. But one night, after another silent dinner for one, I opened my laptop and booked a one-way ticket. No plan, no return date, just a decision made out of desperation more than bravery. My children thought I had lost my mind. My friends said I was running away from my problems. Maybe they were right, but staying felt like slowly disappearing, and I had already disappeared enough. The flight was the longest of my life, 20 hours of doubt. When I landed in Denpasar, the heat hit me like a wall. The air smelled like flowers and exhaust fumes and something frying nearby. Nothing like home, nothing like anything I had known. The first 2 weeks were brutal. I had rented a small house near Ubud, thinking the postcard photos meant paradise. Instead, I found geckos on my ceiling, mosquitoes that seemed to love foreign blood, and a language I couldn't understand, no matter how many times I repeated it back. I got lost twice trying to find a grocery store. I paid too much for a taxi because I didn't know any better. I sat on my porch one evening, surrounded by the sound of insects I couldn't name, and I cried harder than I had in years. I called my daughter that night. I told her I had made a mistake. I told her I was coming home. She didn't say much. She just listened, the way she used to when she was a little girl scared of thunderstorms. I hung up the phone feeling more alone than I had felt in Manchester, and that frightened me more than anything. The next morning, I decided to walk to the small warung down the road, the one I had been avoiding because I couldn't read the menu. An older woman ran it, maybe close to my age, with kind eyes and flour on her hands. I pointed at random to something on a handwritten sign. She laughed gently, not unkindly, and shook her head. She waved me over to the counter instead, spooned rice and vegetables onto a plate, and set it in front of me without a word. I ate in silence. It was simple food, nothing extraordinary. But it was warm. And for the first time in 2 weeks, someone had looked at me and seen a person, not a confused foreigner to tolerate. When I tried to pay, she waved her hand and pointed to a chair, gesturing for me to sit. I stayed there for 2 hours. We barely shared a language, but somehow we shared a conversation. Through gestures, through her showing me photos of her grandchildren, through my showing her photos of mine. Her name was Wayan. Over the following weeks, I came back almost every day. She began teaching me small words. Terima kasih. Selamat pagi. She introduced me to her neighbors, to the man who fixed motorbikes, to the children who ran through the streets in the evening, calling out, "Hello, mister," with enormous grins. Slowly, the unfamiliar streets began to feel less like a maze and more like a neighborhood.